Can we start by telling us your name?
Okay.
And where you were born and where you grew up?
Okay. Well, my name is, everyone knows me as Grace Ramos, but my name is Altagracia. Altagracia Ramos. And I was actually born in El Paso, and I probably lived there for a week, but I was raised in Fort Madison, Iowa. So I was raised in an atmosphere very similar to Ohio, you know, in all ways. And that's where I grew up until I was a junior in high school, and I went out to California for a couple of years and graduated in California, San Bernardino. And then met my husband and ended up back out here in the Midwest in Ohio.
In Ohio. When did you move here?
We moved here in the fall of '66.
What was your first impression of Ohio?
Well, like I tell you, Ohio was very much like home. The climate, the people, it was just very, Iowa and Ohio are really similar, you know. Not a lot of Hispanic families in Iowa. It was a migrant railroad stop, and so that was how my family ended up there. And I was the only Hispanic female in the high school. So coming to Ohio, for me, was not that much different. You know, a lot of similarities. It didn't make much of an impact. Now, my husband, who was born and raised in El Paso, was in total cultural shock and everything, but he had been in the Air Force a few years. Time to adapt.
What was your life like when you moved here? What were some of the things, you mentioned you had similar experiences in Iowa. What were some of the maybe challenges of moving here, if any?
Well, I think we were very family oriented. So I always said with my tias, my tios, my primos, and you know, we went to grandmas and everything. I was raised with my grandmother, the extended family, you know, at various times. An uncle might be living there, an aunt. So that was hard because I was on my own. I was on my own with my husband and at that time one child. And that might have been difficult. I didn't miss, like some people that come from the Southwest, the language, although I spoke it. My grandmother spoke only in Spanish to me. But I didn't miss that. I didn't miss a lot of the food because in Iowa we didn't have access to a lot of stuff anyway. So for me, again, it was just sort of a typical thing. For him, it was hard. So what I tried to do was develop a sort of a Mexican atmosphere in the house. I learned to cook. I learned to make tortillas because we couldn't buy tortillas, so I learned to make tortillas, and that was really the challenge for me until my daughter got in school, and then things changed for me.
Why?
Because when she went to school and started socializing with some of the neighbor children, she started refusing to speak Spanish, and she would say, "Don't speak that funny language, that funny thing," because kids would tease her. And I said, well, honey, you're speaking in Spanish, your dad's speaking Spanish, don't do that. And she did not want me to talk that way, or my husband to talk that way in front of the neighbors. And then I think what really motivated me to get more involved was when she came home on Thanksgiving, and she told me, she says, "Who's my famous ancestor?" And I said, "Well, I don't think we have any." I said, "No, I really can't think of anybody." She goes, "Well, everybody in school has one." I said, "Well," I don't understand, an ancestor?" She goes, "Yes, they all came on the Mayflower, and they're pilgrims." And I was like, okay. So it just so happened that the newspaper had an article on what was it? Anyway, they had an article about Hispanics here in the U.S. or something. And I thought, okay. So I cut that out, and then I wrote a little thing to the teacher, and I said, Sabrina's ancestors met the people on the Mayflower. I said, and not only did they meet them, they spoke in Spanish to them. And Sabrina's eyes just, those are my ancestors? I said, yes, sweetheart, those were your ancestors. I said, so those pilgrims came to your land. And I knew then that something had to be done. So I had a friend, and she was a teacher in the Dayton school system. And I told her about that, and she was a very liberal type person. She says, well, we have to get the word out. And so from then on, I created a sort of a slideshow of Mexico, Mexicans, and went into schools and spoke about the Mexican culture. And I would make tortillas for the kids. They were mainly elementary. It kind of grew, and then I did it for a while. So I was just trying to get the word out. And the other part of that, too, was that I was unusually, again, a Baptist. So my church was not real familiar with Hispanics and Mexicans in particular. So I started introducing things. The first time they asked me what a taco was, I knew I had my work cut out.
Yeah,
So then we started doing things that encouraged education of the Hispanic Mexican culture.
Great. Well, you both, your husband and you are Mexican American. What were some of the traditions that you try to keep alive to your children, besides the language, for example? Tortillas.
Beans, rice. And I wasn't brought up cooking. I did not have to cook at the house. So I had to learn all that. I try to keep that. Not being Catholic, I didn't observe some of the Catholic days, you know, like your King's Day and stuff like that. It was more, and I didn't do a good job of the language. I will say I did not do a good job of that. But I try to keep that alive in them, talking to them about the culture, about some of the things that you know went on. We did get involved at that time. There was a club here called the Latin American Club, and so we did get involved with them. We'd go to their parties. We showed them how to party, and we would go to a lot of that stuff. But there wasn't really a lot going on. And like I said, in my house, it was more about food, culture, music. He liked the Mexican music. I had never really been exposed. I never knew what a mariachi was until I got married. So I kind of evolved myself. The few years I spent in California, and then after marrying him, I really grew. But eventually, we ended up forming the Mexico Club, which participated in the International Festival. And then I started learning myself things I could teach my kids. I taught them the dances. I had a group of students that I taught their dances to, you know, doing things like that.
Did you teach danza folclórica?
Yes.
Okay.
So a couple of them. Would go to Texas and learn them, bring them back and teach them to the kids. We would do, oh gosh, I don't remember the names of them. The one about the alligator, where the alligator is going to eat him up, and the little girl dances and kicks him away. But you know, and the Mexican hat dance, as they refer to it, tapatio, and a couple of others that I would go down and learn, and La Bamba, and teach them to the kids, and then we tried to use all Hispanic or Mexican kids if possible, but we didn't. They weren't all Mexican, and then we would do dances at the International Festival. I think we were on TV for what they used to have, the McDuffie Dog Show or whatever they called it, and so we did things like that, awareness. I think you probably saw some of the pictures of that.
Yes, I did. I did. That for the most part you were a stay-at-home mom.
Yes.
When your kids were young.
Sure.
But you also have been an active member of the community.
Yes.
What are some of the things that you have done?
Well, in the early years, I was more of a support to my husband because he was very active, and so like I said, we did the Mexico Club, and another family did it with us at the very beginning. She did all the sewing of all those costumes that you saw, and all the cooking. I did the putting up the venue and selling it. And so we did that, and again, that was an endeavor of everybody. My husband was one of the original organizers of the Ohio Commission on Latino Affairs. He traveled the state. So in that role, I was more supportive in doing that kind of stuff. He was also the first program coordinator at the base, and he had direct hiring authority, so he brought a lot of Hispanic, Puerto Rican engineers, and we housed them. So I was kind of a mother to a lot of these young people, because he would bring them in and they had nowhere to stay. They were young engineers out of college, their first job. But so, you know, those are the kind of things that we did, and we helped those students coming over here. Some of them now are retiring.
Wow. I
I can't believe it. So, and like I said, in the early years, I was more of a support of him than I was an actual organizer. And so those are the ones that I remember that were the oldest things that we did, the commission, the base organization.
How did you transition into a little more work with immigrants, recent immigrants, or women even?
Well, I think probably when I started to do a little bit more on my own was when I started organizing the Chamber of Commerce. Well, I got involved in politics. I mean, that really was what started me involved in a lot of stuff. He was transferred to Washington, and so we went out there for 3 years, so I got very heavily involved in politics. And I did, as a matter of fact, I worked at the White House under George Herbert Walker Bush. And so I started organizing politically the state and put together an Ohio Hispanic Republicans organization that still to this day we depend on. And so that was part of the first work I did, and then secondly, I got into the civil rights field and was a civil rights commissioner where I ended up retiring after 20 years. So, and then I organized the Chambers of Commerce statewide. And that was kind of a challenge, to bring in the metropolitan areas, Toledo, Columbus, Cleveland, Ohio, Dayton, and try and get them all to agree on everything. But we were very successful. We helped our business entrepreneurs a lot. And so those are kind of the things that I ended up, doing that I think empowered the Hispanic community, especially getting politically involved. We had a lot of people appointed to commissions and boards that have impact on everybody, everybody's everyday life. We had people on the on the chiropractic board. We had people on the tax real estate board. We had people all over, which was something that we had not seen before.
When I was little, I liked to hear stories of when my mom was little. And I love hearing that because my family, I grew up in Mexico, but my family is from El Salvador. So I especially wanted to hear what that was like. And so I wanted to ask you, what are some of the stories that your kids like to hear about you when you were little?
Stories that they like. I used to get in trouble. Well, I tell them about what life was like living with my grandma. We used to call her Big Toe, because we didn't want her to know what we were doing. So, are you going out tonight? I don't know, Big Toe won't let us out. Big Toe kept a very tight control on the girls. Couldn't go out, couldn't date, couldn't have friends. I mean, kind of, I would say in that time, the typical type of Mexican atmosphere. So, the girls like to hear stories of when we would go out. My cousin and I were raised in the house together. And we would get into trouble because we would obviously try to sneak out. And one of them that I remember that they used to laugh was when we did get out and then snuck in through the window. And unfortunately, my cousin tripped on the telephone cord and made some commotion. Well, the rest jumped in bed. She got caught. But I think probably those kind of stories, about the things that we would get into. We climbed a tree one time. And since I was the youngest one in the household, I didn't get a spanking, but the older one did. Because we were not to be climbing trees. And but all of it was an effort of pacifying Big Toe, because if Big Toe got a hold of you, you're dead meat.
Great stories. What has been the funniest story or event that has happened to you here?
In Ohio, the funniest story. Oh my goodness. I know you threw me for a loop on that one.
I can give you a minute to think about it.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the funniest thing that happened to me here in Ohio. Boy, I tell you, I can't think of anything at the moment.
Okay,
I'm sure there is something
like that.
Never thought about something like that, just something funny that happened to me.
Well, talking about family then, what songs or jokes or stories do you feel are a part of your family?
Well, I'm going to laugh because I never thought my kids paid attention to me. And when we went to that talk the other day, and someone said it was Sophia that said something about the cucuy, I started laughing because I said, oh my gosh, the cucuy, my kids were afraid of it. And my daughter in Columbus that I just went to see right now, she says the cucuy lives in her basement in a room where all the Christmas gifts and special things are kept. And she has got her kids convinced that if they go in that room, the cucuy will attack. They don't touch that room. And I started laughing because I didn't even know that they were paying attention to the cucuy. And so that has followed down. And then my uncle, who is now just deceased, I remember him telling me that when he was 21 years old, his dad would still tell him, the cucuy's going to get you. And he would still be like, oh no. So that was a story that has been passed down. And I think probably in many generational families in the Mexican culture, the cucuy, and I think she mentioned La Llorona.
Yeah.
And I didn't ever emphasize La Llorona as much as I did the cucuy. The cucuy did roam this house for a long time.
Great. What does Ohio mean to you?
I think it means an area of opportunity. I think there is so much opportunity, and I think it's opportunity to create what you want, because nothing is set in stone. Politically, it's what they call a swing state, so you don't know who's in power, who's in control. So I think you have the opportunity to be able to do what you want to do, and it's a very conservative state, even though a lot of times we run liberal, so it's a sort of an oxymoron. But I think that's what Ohio means to me. It's an opportunity for anybody that really wants to grow, whether it be personally, a business, or whatever. The opportunity is here. Ohio is full of opportunity.
We've interviewed people, other people that have mentioned faith as a strong part of themselves, of their identity, of the way they grew up. You mentioned you grew up Baptist. And I wanted to ask you, where, in your experience, where has the church have an impact on Latinos here in Ohio, if there has been any role that the church has had?
Oh,
with
definitely.
Latinos?
When I first got here, my first involvement in any kind of organizational thing was with the Dayton Baptist Association. And I did it at statewide level. I was their treasurer for years. I actually had involvement with the Hispano Brotherhood Center, which was started by well, not really started by the Catholic Church, which supposedly had the support of the Catholic Church. And they did a lot of work with a lot of the immigrants, with a lot of the things. They withheld their funds, and that really upset me. So my church stepped in and gave us a house that they owned, a vacant house in Lexington Avenue, which is the west part of Dayton. They gave me the house to house immigrants, and what we did is we turned it into a house where you could live for a couple of months as you migrated out of the fields. All the furniture was donated by NCR. I don't know if NCR was National Cash Register, which had its headquarters here. And it was funded by different organizations, and so the church was very good about doing that, and that's how we started it. Unfortunately, when we left, then we were sent to Alabama. I don't know what happened. I think whoever took over did not continue to grow it. But yeah, without the church, I don't think a lot of it would have been possible. I think after that, the Catholic Church realized that there was competition, and they started stepping in and did help. The Presbyterian Church had some programs that were focused on helping the minority, the Hispanics. So I think that other churches started growing as a result of seeing the need for it. But without my faith, I don't think I would have been able to do anything. I really don't. It has always been we have always been a evangelistic efforts for our church, and that's what I see it as a ministry.
Great. If you were to offer advice to immigrants to Ohio, what would you tell them?
Well, language is very important. They need to learn the language. They need to assimilate, not to leave what they have, but to understand how this country works, how the society works, how business works, how everything works, because
we can stop.
Lo menos que un hombre debe hacer es cantarle a su tierra. Lo más que tú pudiste hacer fue llevar tu pueblo al hombro. Canto de los cantos cuando se
say that. And I think the other thing is, and I think we're really missing this as Hispanics, because I've been involved politically. We need to be involved politically. You can make so many changes with a protest. You can call attention, but you cannot make long-sustaining changes without being part of the system. You need to be part of the system, and you need to institutionalize this and do a systematic way of changing things. And you just can't do it when you're on the outside. And I think politically, we have not even begun to touch the tip of the Hispanic vote and what we need to do. And it's like a battle of the souls, The one party, I think, has more of the values. The other party, though, offers more in in language, maybe not in language, but in ways, if you understand what I'm saying,
Mhm,
you know?
yeah.
Not that they deliver anymore, but at the same time, you know, no, I mean, it's true, you know, they tell you they're gonna do it for you, then they don't do it for you. The other party really is aligned with you more, but they don't ever tell you anything, so, you know, why should you, their perception is that they're not accepting of you.
Mhm.
So you're stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Mhm.
Traditionally, we have, I think, in our history of Mexico, if you study, and I'm not from Mexico, I'm a second generation, but when you go back and look at it, you know, we were a very political country. You know, we have survived through revolutions, we have, you know, taken the downtrodden, we have elevated, we have believed in putting yourself up by the bootstraps, yet we don't reflect that here in the United States. We don't vote like we should, and we don't get involved politically. Well, actually, we don't even protest, which sometimes you do have to do that. We have to understand that to change the system, you have to be part of the system. So I think we haven't gotten to that level. I don't think we've risen in that level yet. Economically, we're rising. Educationally, we're seeing some improvement. But I think as far as politically, which
More
is really where the
participation.
game-changing plans lie, we're not doing it.
What message would you like to give to your kids or grandkids, you have grandkids now, about life in general?
Well, I think you get out of life what you put into it. And I think if you don't have a faith in a higher power, that you are missing the best part of living. And so I would just encourage them to take advantage of everything that's available. There's a speaker I once heard that said that her father had said that life was nothing but papelitos. She says, you're born with a papelito, you work for a papelito, and when you die, they put a papelito. And that's very true. You know, you need to get all those little papelitos along the way, you know, and to survive. But I think also what I would tell them is you cannot help anybody if you can't help yourself. You need to get a job, you need to get an education, and then in turn you can pay that back to other people that haven't got that opportunity. And so I think if we don't do that, then we're not going to continue to prosper as a people. We may prosper as individuals or families and that, but to really empower our people, I think you have to go back and help, and you need to do that.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for this time and for everything that you've told us about your life here in Ohio or in the U.S.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Vengo de unas tierras lejanas al sur de las fronteras, del medio de dos ríos, debajo de la maleza, de entre muchas caras bellas al lado de la colina, en donde los tambores resuenan al tumbao. De una linda morena que baila por las calles debajo del cielo azul, en donde la gente cree, crece y goza, y